Hi, everybody. Welcome along to episode 100 of Percussion Discussion. Before we go any further, I'd just like to thank everybody who has watched or listened or shared or liked or commented or suggested a drummer that I speak to. Really, really appreciate it. And long may it continue. As always, you can find our social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and of course our world famous YouTube channel, where you can find all of our conversations past and present. Please subscribe. It only takes a second, and this way you won't miss any of the upcoming episodes. If you'd rather listen on the go, then no problem. All of our conversations are available in podcast form, and these are free to download from your favorite podcast provider. Now, as it's the 100th episode, I'll ask you really nicely if you wouldn't mind leaving a review. It only takes a few seconds. Hardly anyone has ever done it, even though I've asked 100 times. So please do. It really helps get the word out there. Okay, on to today's guest. The big show, the big 100, deserves a big guest, and they come no bigger. An iconic drummer, respected and revered throughout the land. A guy who has pretty much changed the face of drumming in the last 50 or so years. It gives me great pleasure to welcome the legendary Mr. Billy Cobham. So, Bill, thank you so much for doing this. It's a real honor to have you here with me today.
Pleasure's mine. Pleasure's mine.
And of course, you're our 100th guest. We needed somebody, of your stature, somebody who's influenced so many drummers and musicians over the years. So it's an absolute pleasure. So thank you again.
Thank you very much.
And while I'm thanking people, I have to thank our good mutual friend and fellow drummer and percussionist, Joey Smout. Now, I know you know Joey very well. So
absolutely, he allowed me to completely discombobulate the band book over in the Basel tattoo that we did a few years ago, but it just, with him doing that, it just sort of threw in the idea that, wow, I need to get back. And the Army Band was where I was, and it was my foundation with the 378th Army Band, and working at the Governor's Island in New York, First Army Band, and then in the where is it? The the 19th Army Band, 119th Army Band in Fort Dix. All of those things. What came out of that for me was a sense of discipline and good habits, if you will. Not just how to play, but how to present myself and to see the mutual respect that can be gathered amongst colleagues and people in general, and to be able to do that and to play that through the instrument, the drums, drum sets, and play the marimba, everything that I needed to do to qualify for the military bands. It was a big plus, man. It would never have happened without it, for sure.
And had you not had the military background, would it have affected your professional career afterwards, do you think? Do you think it might have changed things slightly?
Yes. I would have been less disciplined, in how I saw organization. The organizational factor was very important, and that came from being in the band and taking the lead from my superiors, my supervisors, my sergeants, my all those guys. I mean, they had a way. Everything was kind of set. Yes, it was a bit. Yeah, it was the Army. Yes, of course, it was the Army. There was no other way around it. Either you did it that way or see you later. And I found it to be quite important, because before I went into the Army, and also the reason why I got into the Army Band, especially at the time, this was 1964, 65, Vietnam was then, and if I didn't do that, I would have been in the 9th Cavalry, and I would have been a grunt, for sure. Not that took it away from being in the Army Band. Thank God we didn't have to defend the homeland, per se, because we would have been grunts then too. There would be no band. But that didn't happen, and so we were able to learn about how to function from point A to point B, to be responsible for our who we were, how we looked, and how we presented ourselves, and that was something that would have been a problem had I not understood it from before, because I was in drum and bugle corps prior to that. And from the days of, let's see, 1958 was my first drum corps. And I was in St. Catherine's of Siena, drum and bugle corps in Queens. And we were sponsored by the local church, St. Catherine's of Siena Catholic Church, also with the Veterans of Foreign Wars and American Legion. So we were put into this situation, which is still around today, but it's a bit more complicated with all of these different marching bands around, of which some of them existed then, like the Chicago Cavaliers and the Garfield Cadets, or I should say the Cadets of Bergen County. There was another Garfield Phantom Regiment, Casper Troopers. There were some drum corps that we, at my age, at 15 years old or 16 years old, I was competing against, and they're still around, but completely different personality now. And then we can talk about what the drummers did in those bands then and now.
That interests me, yes.
Whole different world. And so what I learned was that the reward, yeah, you got a cup or something like that if you won the contest, but it represented how well you work together with your colleagues. And this is in the teens, in your teens, you're trying you're competing against kids your age, in a group where you're the drum battery of a maybe, it's not a big marching band, maybe 30 horns, and everybody's trying to play. They're busy just trying to blow their hearts out, for 15 minutes in a contest with a whole maneuvering, marching thing happening with us, and they want to get as close to the music as possible. But everything is about in that stage. How do I stay in line? How does it keep the line to, dressing, dress right, dress left, right. All of this, trying to keep that happening as you did it. When I look back at it now at 78 or even earlier than the last few years, I go, wow, I was very blessed, because you don't learn that otherwise. And I probably would not have gotten into the Army Band had it not been for my speciality, working with what in the States they call the ancient drum corps prior to marching and maneuvering corps. So I had to do the whole three-corner hat bit, with the regimentals and all that prior to that. And that's where I got all of my rudiments together at 110 beats per minute, playing 3S sticks, coming from way out of line out here to play on a snare drum, a long snare drum in the middle, and walk with this for a few miles in parades or whatever, with just fife and drum. And then it was marching. Then it was drum and bugle corps, where it was no more fifes, and we were marching at 132 beats a minute. For 15 minutes, and even doing like the Macy's parade or these kind of things, but we had to look the right way. And you only got to these parades if you had the reputation of being a very nice-looking group of kids that marched well, and generally everyone understood what you were trying to play, And this kept going into after the age of 18. I started working with the Sunrisers Drum and Bugle Corps, and we won the Eastern Championships, and we were able to go to the finals, the national finals, which I can't even remember. I think it was in New Jersey at the Dream in Newark. And we did this, and then I went into the Army. So it was my lead right up to it. So when I finally took my examination to join the Army Band, the first thing they wanted me to do, but it wasn't for free, was to join the United States Army Band. And then the guy said, of course, if you sign here, you'll sign on for 8 years. And I said, whoa, not 8 years? Why? He said, well, it's the Army Band. I'm going, yeah, I'm honored, man, but I see myself playing with Horace Silver down the road in a quintet, and it ain't going to be 8 years later. I don't think so, no. And he said, well, if you don't do that, then you can't have this band. And then they didn't know where to put me, so I had studied. I was at the School of Performing Arts the High School of Performing Arts in New York, and one of our main tutors was Maestro Leonard Bernstein, in because it was a city, was a school for all of the special kids who were into high school. So lots of people went to school with me then. Bobby Colombi, all kinds of people that were from Blood, Sweat, and Tears. Eddie Gomez, a great jazz bass player, was my next door, sat next door to me on my left side. Richard Tenreich, who everyone knows as Richard T, who died many years ago. He was sitting behind me, you know. And so all these guys, Jimmy Owens, a great trumpet player, jazz player, and it just, then the list went on and on and on. A lot of people who played jazz, who were successful. We went to school together, and so while that was happening, I was in drum corps and all. I learned so much that I knew that I'd probably be able to work straight out of the military, which I did. When I came out of the United States Army in '68, my first gig after that was with Horace Silver. Within 2 or 3 weeks, we started working. That was January. So February, the first 2 weeks out, I was working at the half note with Horace Silver, and we worked for 10 straight months, averaging about 3 weeks a month, and ending in, of all places, Ronnie Scott's in December. And we came early, and that was the first time I met Art Blakey, first time I met Quincy Jones, Ronnie himself, and Pete King. It was just like, wow. But it seemed like it was all natural, because by then I had been working on the road, especially in that European tour that started at, of all places, a workingmen's club in Yorkshire. That was our very first gig.
Wow.
And we did 45 shows in 2 months in Europe. And we started in England, we ended in England. It was a George Wein jazz tour. And we were on a bus pretty much all the time with the Max Roach Quintet, Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers. That was 3 of us. That's Horace, Max, Art Blakey. Who else was there? The Stars of Faith Gospel Choir, and I'm sorry, Elvin Jones Trio with Joe Farrell and Jimmy Garrison, and that was the bus.
Wow!
And that was the festival that went to play a show. Those 5 bands, and where we stayed? We stayed at at the White House Hotel. In Oxford Circus. Yeah, that was the very first place, and what I can remember it like it happened yesterday, because when we landed, wow, I'm in England, wow, and wow, Kew Gardens, like all of this. Well, it's not Kew Gardens. I'm sorry, the big park. Can't remember now. But anyway, we're like there. I go outside to see. Wow, this is London. I can't believe I'm in London. And I'm walking down the street, and all of a sudden I realize, oh man, I'm late. I have to go catch the bus. The bus is loading up. I get back. I have all my stuff packed, but I was so jet lagged that I left it all in the room, except for, of all things, I brought a General Electric record player with me that didn't work in England, and I couldn't understand why, because I didn't understand the plug, and I just never got it all. So that was a joke. Finally got a small, later, an adapter and a step-up transformer, and that saved my days going from city to city across in Western Europe with the band, listening to anything from Brazil '66 back then to all Monk, everything. I bought a Foot Locker full of LPs that I carried with me, and that's all. I forgot my clothes, but I did remember that and put it on the bus. And then I passed out until we got to the Workingmen's Club, and that was the beginning of my European tour and my involvement in Europe.
Just amazing. I mean, I can't imagine taking a record player on tour these days.
Yeah, I mean, Army. I had everything was in a Foot Locker of one sort or another. I left all my clothes, man, in a Foot Locker in the White House
Oh, hello.
hotel.
Wow.
And it followed every day. It came the day after, and I ended up coming home without it and receiving it about a week later through customs. Never wore the shirt. Never wore the clothes. I kept buying stuff. I didn't know. I was totally out of control. You know, no experiences, but at the time as to how to live.
Yeah,
But that's how I learned.
that is
Hmm.
experience, though, isn't it? If you think about it.
It was amazing. It was amazing. It
Bill,
was the first
oh, go
time
on.
in my life that it was the first time in my life on that tour in Copenhagen, I guess towards the latter part of the tour, that I ever experienced this the feeling of I had an out of body experience. Because we played so much together, and I was so tired and exhausted that I got the feeling that at some point in time we were playing the Copenhagen Jazz Festival and we're sitting on the bandstand and we're burning. And Horace's tempos were scary sometimes. I mean, and I was sleeping in my mind because I thought I saw myself. I was sitting in the front row watching me play on the bandstand, and it was fine, until I realized that I was watching me play. Then I panicked, and this is like the band's burning. No one missed me, and it felt absolutely amazing, and that was one of three times that ever happened to me in my life. It was amazing, and it just showed how much when bands played like that. I mean, all these bands, no one read any music on the bandstand. The music was read in rehearsal. Once you got all the notes right, the music was never seen again. Now it was interpreting the music for what you remembered it was in your head, and that's how So I rarely ever read music on the bandstand. Especially if I wrote it.
Yeah.
Mm.
So
And all
that's
these things came
interesting.
out.
So,
Yeah,
so I had no idea that parts would have been given out or written, with Horace or whoever it was.
sure.
You just imagine with jazz musicians, it's just something you do. You know the arrangement, and you go. It's really refreshing to know that parts were there, present in
Hmm.
rehearsals. That's cool.
Initially, there was always an arrangement.
Mm,
That's no big deal.
mm.
The heavy is when you went and looked at the Basie book or the Ellington book, and it was two or three Bibles in one. I mean, it was huge. We're talking multiple pages, could be maybe 500 to 750 pages of material,
Wow.
and they all had numbers, and they were always constantly being replenished, refreshed with new arrangements, and everybody in the band knew the book, quote unquote.
Wow.
Okay, it was like, okay, the lines were like, okay, Pop says, Basie, the old man says we're going to play 750. We'll open up with 750, no names, 750, 27. We'll do number one, and then we'll come back over and we'll do number 25. And everybody's just going shh, 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 to see what that was,
Yeah.
and then write down the name of the on the heading of the part of what that is, and then play it.
That's
They
terrifying.
didn't take the music out of the book. They just went. You only went back to the book if you had a wrong note and you couldn't figure out. Well, that's weird. I thought it was flatted or it was sharp. That's it.
That's terrifying. I had no idea.
Sure.
That's I would, well, yeah, I just wouldn't. It's as simple as that. There's no way I wouldn't know where to begin.
Well, Maddie, I mean, we're talking about a band that had a 2-week vacation a year.
Yeah.
if you want to call it that. The rest of the time, any off days were the days that the band had to go by bus to play a place that they couldn't get to in 24 hours.
Yeah.
Everybody's working all the time. That their seats were specifically set up by seniority. So all the oldest people sat in the front, and of course, because there was a lot of diesel fuel or gas in the back, so all the youngest people sat there, and and that's how somebody died. Then you moved up,
It's a different time, and I wish I'd have been around then to see this kind of thing.
It's interesting, I'll tell you that. It's interesting.
If you don't mind, Bill, I want to just skip back just a little bit to the the drum corps thing. I honestly believe, and I've spoken about a few people with this, that over in America, drummers who are involved in this have a huge advantage over drummers over here in the UK. We don't get the fact that the rudiments are force fed and used. I think it's a huge advantage. Would you agree?
I agree, but here's the conundrum about this. The rudiments were created in Swiss,
Yes, of course.
and then they came, of course, to Britain and to France. Then they went to the United States,
Yeah.
okay, and Canada and all. So it's like it's not about the rudimentary procedures. It's about the music and the interpretation of the music. The music to me is a sonic representative of our history, individually and collectively. So if you go that route, certain regions are going to put the basic procedures of playing music to the background for whatever political or sociological gains or things that are happening. It's just the way it is. So yeah, we lost. I mean, in Europe there was a lot lost, but you always had the foundation of it all was there. I mean, to see what the Swiss, to go to in the national championships, they would have an exhibition of from time to time of Swiss drummers coming in because they wanted to talk about the origins of rudiments. And maybe it was a small group of people who specialized in only playing the rudiments to a point where it was quite extreme. But you could have a contest where two men or two individuals played on one drum, an etude, but it was right. One was assigned the right hand, and the other was assigned the left hand.
Right.
Okay, and the objective was so there's the rules. You're going to play this thing at 110 beats per minute with dynamics, right? One right hand, one left hand, two different people, and you're going to play for minimum 2.5 minutes of this whole thing that you created, and you cannot tap your foot.
Oh dear me!
So all of this has to be like this. 110 beats per minute. There's a and all is grace notes, the whole 9 yards. You mess up, a kick comes off, and it was amazing to watch. And you realize, for me, a little person, I'm going, God, that's not just deep. If I could just play the rudiment properly with both hands, but two different people playing it, and of course it's like ice skating. You have basic rudimental procedures. You have to do twirls, and you have to show balance and this, and before you go into your program. But these guys were playing a long roll, right hand versus left hand, and loud, so it started with right, right, left, left, right, right. Left, left, and then right, right, left, left, right, right, left. But you can't tap your foot, right, right. Then right, right, left, left, right, right, left, left, right, right, left, left, right, right, left, left, right, right. And then and they're holding this, and you're supposed to keep it very even, and they're being marked for this. Everybody's eyes are going like, no, this can't be.
And
they're playing.
It's musical as well, a musical performance.
Yes, yes. And they're playing on calfskin, So therefore, the reason for the arms coming up is because calfskin doesn't give very much, especially if depending on the day. God help us if it's a wet, kind of a humid day. It's the summer and it's humid. It's on right on the river, and so they're playing with absolute forearms. If they're coming from the back of the stadium to play this drum, of course the volume of not the volume but the sound, the tone of the drum. Again, it's an 18-inch field snare. 15 by 18-inch field snare, or 16 by 18. And it's deep and it's rope drummed, and you can't tune it but much. It's all of these things, and they had to tuck the heads on the day of the show, and then canned heat, the whole silliness with that. God, if you make a mistake and the thing breaks, you have to start again, and right. And you understand, I really much I realize how much gain so much respect for just the creation of a drum, and the ropes and how they were braided and blah 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 blah, and all of this was coming out just about a drum. Now we have to play it, and what we're going to do and why the forearms and why the grip and all of this, and we're only using one side of the body to play. It's silly, and it took it to another level. Very deep stuff.
This leads kind of nicely on to where I wanted to go, and you've talked about creating the sound from the drum. From all your playing I've ever seen you do, you've always created warm sounds, and it's never been forced. It's always just warmth. I mean, could you tell us a little bit about that, Bill, if you don't mind?
Well, it came through my experiences with Fred Daniel Hinger, who was he was a bit of a radical, and also the other radical was Vic Firth. And so between those two guys, I had the German, really kind of, how can I call it? It really, you held every stick, every stroke. The whole body became a stroke. That was Fred Hinger. But what he did was he didn't use wood. He used aluminum. He made snare drum sticks out of aluminum and rubber. And for playing, he was a classical timpanist, but he also made the timpani himself. These are the guys like him, Bill Gladstone, Buster Bailey. This was like the New York Philharmonic Percussion Ensemble. Saul Goodman, Chauncey Morehouse. These guys would get a snare drum and then take it completely apart and put it back together in the way that they felt Kusevitsky really wanted it. And hence, the Gladstone drums came, all of these things because of convenience, because they were thinking geniuses. Okay, on the other side, and Hinger was with the Pittsburgh Symphony and then the Metropolitan Opera Symphony later, his last stop, I think. But he was in Dallas, and he just made the chain drive timpani, the ones, but his hands were like vices. I mean, you didn't want to shake his hand, his left hand or right, because they tuned So the tendons and the muscles in his hands were way overdeveloped, and but yet he had this a sensitivity where everything just came off of his arm, but he used his whole forearm to play a crushed roll, where, in contrast, Vic used only his fingers. And so everything was, he used the weight of the stick to balance the whole thing. So I was blessed because I knew them both.
Yeah.
And so I could compare notes because I felt they were both right. The one that I got more from and longevity from in performance was Vic, because I didn't have to work as hard. Fred died because his muscles just, I mean, if anything, okay, the person who would come close to Fred Hingle would be Buddy Rich. He had problems with his back. He had, the muscles just gave way because his brain was stronger than the body. And he pushed his body to a point where he would go into he'd have to go into traction to get the muscles relaxed in the hospital. Or sometimes he couldn't do any more. So what he would do, because he couldn't lose the gigs, he couldn't lose the work with Harry James or these guys, or the Dorsey brothers or anything. So he would play with one hand the book because it wasn't that difficult to play for him.
Yeah, sure.
So he was, to me, Buddy was the prime example of someone who was way overqualified to play what he was playing. And he needed to have a band of his own to really show what he could do. But that's an individual thing. When it came to playing with the band, which he tried to force everybody in his band to do, they still didn't get it. So he was at loggerheads with them all the time because they just wouldn't pay attention. He didn't help himself. I mean, he was that kind of personality anyway. So that's another story for another day. But the thing is, just like on the other side, you could play more dynamically longer. You could sustain tempos longer with less power if you understood how a stick reacted to in terms of responding off the top of a head. Why a plastic head was far more easy to provide a presentation through than a calfskin head. All of that, but it came from the knowledge of that. Where rolled snares, calf snares came in handy versus wire snares or steel strand snares. Different materials that could be used for a shell, like fiberglass, would work versus a wood shell, a birch, a Purple Heart wood snare, or something like this. They all had different personalities and characters, and all these things used to be I've always been very curious about them more and more and more as I got older, when I understood that under certain circumstances I could do certain things, and with a certain kind of snare drum or a drum set that I could not get happening otherwise.
Yes.
And so that fed into what my position as a player, because if I had the right combination of elements, then I could play much more effectively, not only for everybody else, but first and foremost for myself. If I don't hear myself properly playing, I'm not going to be able to play as well as I would like to, and I'm going to be uncomfortable, and everyone in the audience is going to hear it and feel it.
So there's quite a thought process prior to your gig to work out what equipment you're going to take.
Pre-production, yes. Pre-production. Production is when you get on the bandstand and play. Then you're in trouble, one way or another. Either you're in it and it better work, as much as you can get it to work, with the idea that, if I had this or I had that, okay, next time, if it ever comes, I know what to do, and that's when you're in it for the lifetime.
Sure.
If you're only in it for the short game, then it doesn't matter. But me, I mean, it's what I do. It's my life. So I have a lot of different drums, and debate, and it becomes a kind of a gamble. Speculation. Do I take this or do I take that purple wood, or do I take some black locust, and not just maple and birch. That's fine.
Yes, of
It's
course.
fine. And then it's all. Then we get into what's the front of house going to sound like? What could I project there? Depending on the room, if we're going to be outside, then I better take something. Maybe not necessarily wood. Depends. It depends on the music.
Yeah.
What am I going to play? Um, can I get away with this or that? First and foremost, I need to hear the music, the notes come back at me.
Sure.
If they don't come back at me at a frequency that's somewhere off of a snare drum that's high mids and highs, I got a problem because I like to have a snappy snare, something that I feel I don't have to play so hard, to get that personality to come out.
And I guess then you're getting into once you've decided on that and the where the gig's going to take place. Do you get into heads and things as well? Then I guess.
Yeah, you are right,
Hmm.
right. So it depends on what size his head the drum is. I mean, if it's going to be a funk or a funk band, I'm not going to take anything out that's going to be deeper than a seven, and that depends on what kind of head I've got to work with. And those days only started that only started to open up maybe 20 years ago, 20 no 30 years ago. Otherwise, it was Remo, pretty much Emperor, Ambassador, Diplomat.
Yeah.
And Diplomats I rarely ever used unless I was playing Bolero as a sub for the New York Phil or something. But I didn't need it. I'd blow right through it,
Yeah.
So that it didn't make sense. And of course, it's just not even it's 0.25 millimeter snare drum head. That's not even one ply, you know. So all of this you have to get to know what that is, and if it's going to be a snow head, if it's going to have some kind of resistance for brushes. You just don't put it on there and go, okay, thump, this is it. You better know what you're doing.
It's a remarkable amount of work that you've got to do beforehand just to and I guess you need to know what you're up against, and do you every venue do you still go through this process?
Yeah, but before the venue, I
Yeah.
mean, I just found out we're going to play, for instance, in Germany, in on Saturday, and my wife just told me, she said, "Yeah, it's crazy. It's raining out, and it's right now about 14 degrees or 15 degrees in the middle of the day," and she says, "Wow, I sure hope it's not raining because it's going to be it's going to be a little bit chilly. It's an open air," and I'm going, open air. And I'm thinking, wow, good thing I didn't go get the snare drum. I was thinking about a completely different snare drum. Now I'm going to a metal snare drum because I'm not going to be able to play out there. Yeah, it'll be warm on stage at night, and we're closing the show. So, yeah, let's see what happens. So we better be prepared.
Sure.
So I need to go with the weather, see what I've got to do, and see these are the options I've got now in the different ways. I can go, I have a Babinka drum set. Cool. What kind of snares can I put on top of the batter head on top of that? Well, let me bring a metal snare just in case, because you just never know. And just doing it.
It's fascinating, and
Mhm.
I have to ask because this also interests me. Are you super critical with monitoring as well? Because I know it plays a big part of shows these days.
Oh, yeah. And so what I have to do is bring my monitors, my in-ear monitors,
Yeah, sure.
which are these things,
Hmm.
and these guys come. I know that it's self-powered, so it's active,
Hmm.
and I go with this. It's got a 9 volt in it. Or not, actually, this is a lithium,
Hmm.
and it plugs into here, and then out of here goes into a Shure. Um, what do they call it?
Radio.
Receiver,
Yeah, yeah.
and we're off to the races. But I can then control it. I have my levels here. I have a small fader on the side, and that way I know I have at least a chance. At least a chance.
Yeah.
Because I've got to hear everybody. The more comfortable I am with what I'm hearing on the bandstand, especially of my arrangements that I know,
Yeah.
then if I'm not having to compensate for what I'm not hearing, which means that I'm imagining that a horn part was played, but I'm not hearing it. Why? Because it's not in my mix. But I have enough time to change that now. I'm going to play better. But if I hear it all, then it's even easier for me to play. Then I'm more secure, and it's a question of security. You see, so
it's important, isn't it? You know, and
I'll say
it's something that it isn't talked about that often. Monitoring, and I mean, obviously, the difference between the old days when you'd get a huge speaker with just tearing your head off, and now you're getting almost a front of house mix in your ears. It's what a difference.
That's important. Yeah, but it was coming. It was coming. It was just how to make it smaller.
Yeah,
and I think that it's an art form that's only as good as the person who's playing. If you don't know what you're looking for, those headphones have microphones on the outside.
Oh,
so they're presenting so it's like, okay, you become the actual. You're playing the drums, but they're coming in. They have it's kind of like a loop. So you're hearing your drum set electronically, but in three-dimensional, on a three-dimensional platform. Okay, but it's just right there. So it's not just here. It's picking up the sounds, the ambiance around, and it's balancing out. And they're expensive. I mean, what's expensive? If you can invest to get the best possible performance platform you can, by all means do so. Because you're only going to play that much better. You see.
Yeah.
And it's when I went to see, for instance, I was in Portugal, and I came to close a 3-day festival, a percussion festival, a jazz percussion festival that featured Dennis Chambers on the opening night with Mike Stern, and then the next night when I arrived in the day, we had a chance to hear Dave Weckle's band, and they were playing, and then I played the following night after they left, and the difference was that they didn't have someone to take care of the monitors for them. And they paid a very serious price, because Dave's stuff is very, very complicated.
Yeah.
And not just complicated, it needs constant hands-on controls by someone who knows the music. And if they don't, and it's a guy that just set up the sound system who knows how the board works, and so which means he turns on the board. He knows where it's like setting somebody into a B-52 bomber, and because they know how to turn the engines on. Okay, but now you have to get the plane to move and take off and sustain. No way. And they just go, well, it's not my fault, man. I don't know. I just know how to turn it on. Now it's up to you. And so they just sit there with their hands folded, and whatever happens on the bandstand is a problem.
Yeah.
That's not where you want to be, and so the best way to handle that stuff is you still need somebody, a human being out front. But I see why Dave uses headphones and all of that, because he doesn't know what he's going to get, and I can't blame him for it. Many times he's going to be out there by himself, and at least if he's hearing what he's doing to some degree, he can make it work. And then the reward is when everybody's in the right place, the right people are doing and how many times can that happen on a tour? It's always in the deficit, man. It's never 50-50. Always a problem every day.
Yeah.
But here we go.
It must be a constant worry and frustration on a tour, that.
Oh, yeah. And for me, the only time that I really, really enjoyed playing where I didn't have to worry about that was when I was with Peter Gabriel, and I was on bandstand. But there's 6 of us. There were 85 technicians. over the stage. That was 1994, and I just walked and walked. All I had to do was just walk on the bandstand. After about a week of getting everything tweaked out, I'll swing 3 bass drums, 3 snare drums, and 9 toms, all this kind of stuff to play Sledgehammer, right? Go figure. And the thing is that you just sat down and you played, and it all worked every day, no problem. He'd sit down at my set, and he was singing the tune, and we were in the front, and everything worked like a fine-tuned, everything was an A440. It was amazing, and I went, yeah, but the investment, the cost, but at the same time, here I'm getting sick from looking out at the crowd that I'm getting movement sickness from, because it was so huge. I mean, we were averaging like 85,000 people a night, and I am used to playing I'm happy if I got 300 people in a club, and so it's a wave, and it's going like this because they're reacting to the sound of the speakers that far back, on say Hockenheimer Ring or something like this, or the old Rhein Munich airport, and we're sitting playing to 80 or 90,000 people at the end of the airports, of the active runway, what it used to be. And it's like, come on, what do you do with that? The whole other world, man. It's
phenomenal. It really is. And we talked about snare drums, and you mentioned Billy Gladstone. Mm-hmm. Have you ever, or do you own a Billy Gladstone drum?
I own 2 Billy Gladstone drum sets. I own about 7 snare drums. Wow. Billy Gladstone snare. Lang Gladstone. His student, Morris Lang, took his place when he died.
Yeah.
And Morris continued to make the snares, and I have them. I have a few for myself, and Morris made. Actually, it's not 2. I have 3. I have a Cocobolo set. I have a Marine Pearl small jazz set with 2 bass drums, white Marine Pearl, and I have a Black Diamond Pearl set that I haven't used in a long time. That I almost sold to Tony Williams. Then I realized he wouldn't know what to do with it.
Oh dear me! Now I'd like to talk about a couple of albums, if that's all right with you, Bill. If you've got a few
no problem.
Now, I've always had a fascination with the Miles Davis album, Bitches Brew, and the A drummer and the left and the right drummer, whichever way you look at it. Mm-hmm. And the tune you played, I don't know, is it Feo, or I'm not quite sure how it's pronounced properly.
I don't know.
The last track on the album, right?
I don't know. All I know is that what we went in there to play.
Yeah.
What we went in there to play, we didn't rehearse. It all happened.
Yeah.
And to this day, I can't remember which tune I'm playing on. It was the kind of studio thing where people are saying, "Hey, you sound good." I'm going, I did? But it was, to me, it wasn't disorganized. On the contrary, it was more organized confusion. I had no idea.
Yeah.
And all I know is that we went from one thing to the next. They did all of this editing in the studio. And that's what they came up with. And who am I to say, man, I don't like it? Or not, I don't mind it. That's just me personally. I didn't understand. I was too young to understand, for me. Certain things came to me much, much later as I became aware of the direction that was being sought from the musicians to present their ideas. But I swear, I'm the first one to say, "What? Really? Wow, I didn't know that." And just continue to learn, move on, and gain from the experience of learning, hearing what everybody else did and how we reacted to each other. Because fundamentally, Miles was was a genius at getting people to come together to just play. And what came out to me was a salute to who he was.
Yeah. Yes, I like that.
And it was amazing. And he just sometimes he wouldn't just point. He'd just look at somebody, and you start to play, and someone else would join in, and something else would start to happen, and then he'd start to play whatever he's going to play, and it would all work. And you go, you never even thought twice about it. Wow, he did that? No. Now you're in it for all in, you know, fully committed. And that was the beauty of it all for me. I was happy with that.
It's just, I find it fascinating, and you know, and the musicians that were on that album. I mean, Joe Zawinul, you know, Wayne Shorter, Chick Corea, Dave Holland. Names don't get any bigger. Jack DeJohnette, you know, how many drummers were on? It was incredible.
Yeah, and they just express themselves amongst themselves because there's so much mutual respect amongst all the musicians there. Some musicians, I mean, I don't know Jack DeJohnette. If I saw him and spoke to him, God be my judge, I can't say much more than 4 or 5 times in my life. It's
Really?
It's a lot. Chick Corea, less.
Right.
Dave Holland, once. And I can exactly remember when I spoke to Dave Holland.
Yeah.
He played on, I've only performed with him on stage once, where we played in a band together. He took the place of Ron Carter on a gig that Ron got sick on.
Okay.
That's it. And when I offered to, you know, to try to extend it, he was not interested in doing any more. His representative said that he was really working pretty hard and he couldn't take on any more work. I got it. It wasn't a slight. You know, it was, some of us you just can't do everything, you know. So you just, I wanted to get a better understanding as to how to work with someone like that. But it wasn't happening, so there we go. You know, life still goes on and we move on. But Jack, Tony, Tony Williams, I was his guest in Japan. We played together, and that's on YouTube. But it's all stereo. It's something you can listen to. You can't see us. But it's available at the Live Under the Sky festival. I think it was 1996 or thereabouts.
Sure.
No, 1978 is when that happened. And let's see, who else we didn't play a lot with. I mean, from Miles, I've rarely played with Larry Young. I played with Joe Zawinul on the recording with Roberta Flack and Donny Hathaway called "You've Got a Friend."
Oh, right.
And I was the drummer. Joe played electric piano, and Eric Gale, who normally plays guitar, was the bass player because they couldn't find the rhythm section they needed at Atlantic. The normal rhythm section that worked those kind of dates, which would have been Eric Gale on guitar, Chuck Rainey on bass, and Bernard Purdy on drums. They were on the road with Roberta, with Aretha.
Okay.
So this thing popped up in the middle of nowhere, and everybody just sort of fell into place. And we did this thing, not having any idea. It was like kind of like a filler. It was a Carole King tune, and Roberta came to. It was a Donny Hathaway record, I think, and Roberta came in and sang on it with him. Next thing you know, it was a big success. And the rhythm section was like, what? Who played on this? You know, how? When did this happen? You know, why was it? And, you know, these were the kind of stories that you go into. This is the old Atlantic Studios where I forget who's, there was a muffler for the throat that was owned by one of the original developers of the recording studio. It had been hanging on the steam pipes. I mean, it was blue and red, but by the time they finally took it down, it was pure gray, and it was just dirt, you know. And It was hanging there, but it was part of the studio. No one wanted to touch it because they had such success with the studio. They never even wanted to change the recording board because the recording board that they had expanded on when the tooling came up that they could make it a stereo board. It was a mono board, so all the faders to make everything louder came towards the engineer as opposed to forward. I mean, that's how old the studio was in New York City on 64th Street, and thousands of hit records came out of there.
They're frightened it was going to lose its magic, basically, its mojo, whatever you want to call it.
I mean, and again, to me, yeah, all of those things are fine, but we listen to each other. Not just listen, but we actually interpreted what we felt were the best of each other's presentations to turn it into a unified effort, that musical effort that supported these two singers, and it was a testament to the musicianship of everyone and the commitment we all made, I think, to making this thing happen. Because again, there was respect for Roberta, respect for Donnie. Can't be more than that, you know.
I mean, you're talking two of the best singers that have ever been. Really.
You know, it's all there. It never went away. In the young musicians today, if they hear something that they feel comfortable playing, a different personality comes out because it's home for them, you know.
Yes.
They can't play what they don't know. They can attempt it and put on a kind of a strong face, but it's just a face. It's not the real deal. It's the same thing with music all the time. Music never lies.
Yeah, it's interesting. I like that. Bill, look, I really appreciate your time here. I've got one more thing to ask you, if that's okay. Mm-hmm. If you could spare me the time now. There's one album which drummers go weak at the knees at when it's mentioned, and that has to be Spectrum, of course. Now, Spectrum was released 16 days before I was born, and it's an album I'm sure many of us either watching or listening to will have, you know, listened to countless times. Now, is it true it was recorded over just a couple of days?
Yes.
That's insane. I mean, how well rehearsed was that band to go and do that in such a short amount of time?
We had 2 days rehearsal.
On all those, literally on those arrangements, and that is it.
All of it. Yeah, all of it. Wow. We had 2 days rehearsal. Not true. We had 2 days rehearsal on. No, it's not true. We had a day's rehearsal in advance. Because what I did was I took a different road in terms of choosing the personnel. I tried to find, and I was successful, very lucky, in finding a guitar player that would fit the tunes that I wanted him to play on.
Tommy, of course.
And in every case, it was about that.
Yeah.
I was going to use Stanley Clarke, but Stanley was overqualified for what I had in mind. And we did have a rehearsal with Stanley and Larry Young and Jan Hammer, and it didn't work. So that might have, and for me, I walked away with the idea that what I found was there were geniuses at every station, but no one was playing together. Stanley was young. He was the cog in the wheel. I needed to pull him because he gave me more than I needed.
Yeah.
And that experience transferred to me when I went to record with Quincy Jones in California many years later.
Yeah.
On an album by the Brothers Johnson. And I was at A&M Studios, and I wanted to play so much with Q that I just let it all rip. But the problem with that was I was only playing for Bill. I wasn't playing for Q.
Yeah.
And what I needed in Spectrum was I needed that groove, that feeling. And how can I put it? I found that a very interesting point that's always made, that I've always heard from many experienced musicians who've been there, is how complicated it is to play simple.
Mm.
And you smile and you do, and you go, okay, there's another one. That's another one of these things that people just say, but it's not true. If you know, I mean, you got your parchment on the wall, doctor, blah blah blah, and you studied. You put your heart and soul into this stuff, and then you turn around, and you have to just lay it down. You know, at again, 2, 3, 4. Can you keep that tempo for a tune? And that might be slow right now, but I mean, it could be a little bit faster. But to be able to do that, you have to live that, man. And the people who live that were so busy working with that kind of tempo that they never did go to school to understand even what key they were playing in.
Sure.
So they couldn't tell you what key that was in. Another reason why I wrote it in B, because I just wanted to see what anyone would do in the key of B minor as opposed to B flat.
Yes.
I mean, just to see, you know, and no one even thought about it, those guys that I was thinking about, because Tommy Bolin didn't read.
Yeah.
Lee Sklar only read changes.
Yeah.
Jan read, but Jan never had to look at anything unless he played violin, he did everything. But it was all about the music and how we related together. And forget the technical facility thing, you know. All of a sudden, wow, what do we have? We have a hit because we're doing what all of us do as grunts in the music business. We do what we know. We play who we are. We play where we came from. And what may appear to be mistakes that we make is actually an inkling and a crack in the door to the future where we want to go. That's it. If you can't do that, it ain't gonna happen. It's gonna happen only to a certain point, and you're gonna want to replay it and replay it and replay it and replay it until you end up taking the first take. It's always the same.
Do you know, I don't really write questions down. I write bullet points, and I've just got. I'm reading it off here now, and it just says Tommy Bolin inspired, and that's all I've written by it.
Yeah, you know, it's just like Tom Sklar. You know, I started with Stanley, and I ended up with Sklar. And the way I ended up with Sklar is that we were both in the same management firm, and he was coming up in the elevator, and I was going down in it. So when he opened the door, I said, "Hey, Lee, how you doing?" He said, "Oh, man, I'm fine." I said, "Are you going to be up here for a little while?" I said, "Yeah, I'll be around." I said, "One question." I hold it in the door. I said, "You free? I mean, I'm going to go and do some recording tomorrow night at Jimi Hendrix's. You want to come on down?" He said, "Okay." And then that's on the following night.
And that's as simple as that.
Yeah. He said, "Yeah, it makes sense." I mean, Sklar always says it's the fastest recording session he ever had. But it was in his wheelhouse. It was what he did.
Yeah.
Very clean. It was right there. So for him, we did 3 tunes with him, right on the money, man. Never had a problem. We had a ball. Went and had a hamburger afterwards. It was no problem.
It's just hard to imagine these days, you know. I mean, 2 or 3 days is no time at all, is it? Really, 2 days, whatever.
Can you imagine? This is a week, a total week, right? So we go. Let's say we started Monday. We recorded, got levels. It's at Hendrix's. We recorded, then got those tracks. Brought in Ron Carter and Joe Farrell and Jimmy Owens with Jan and me and that. Oh, and John Tropez. I think Ray Barretto may have played congas on something. We did that on Lily and To the Women in My Life. Okay, done. So that's Monday, Tuesday, around midday Wednesday. We made rough mixes. On Thursday, we were on a flight to, of all places, London to mix the record at oh man, I can't. Where Mahavishnu used to, we recorded both the Birds of Fire, recorded the Birds of Fire album there. We started the Lost Tapes, as they call it, the
Yeah.
third album there, and that was in can't remember the name of it now, with Ken Scott.
Okay.
But I did all of that with Ken. We did that. I was home. So let's say I left on a Thursday. We finished mixing on the Sunday. I was home on the Monday. The record's done. We mastered in New York on the Tuesday.
Can you imagine that these days? Just you know how long things take. Everything takes longer.
Understand? When I did the Crosswinds album, um, was it the Crosswinds album? I'm pretty sure it was. Steely Dan, was it Asia? Something like that, back mid 70s.
Yeah, yeah, sounds about right.
I heard that that record cost 700 and something thousand bucks to make.
Yeah.
And they shrunk wrapped that record three times because the band never couldn't agree on all the tracks. That they heard flaws in it, and I was just shaking my head, going, "Man, that's a story right there." But it was the nature of the business. Those guys didn't pay that money. It was all a write-off for Blue Thumb Records or ABC or something. And I'm going, and that my first album cost me $22,000 to make, including the flights back and forth and everything.
Just amazing to and amazing to hear this from yourself as well. You don't hear enough about it from what I've heard.
No, but here's the origins. I mean, you get around people like Q, Quincy, or Miles. Miles is great at managing. You know, he knew who to choose to fit what.
Mm.
Call it luck or whatever, but if he was just blessed, amazing. He could even, when he was sick, I remember reading in Herbie Hancock's book, he called Herbie because he knew Herbie could do the job and fill in for him properly, and everybody would be happy. Herbie had a hit record, but not only that, even if he didn't have one, he'd made such a name for himself, and his personality was so strong. There was never a problem about that. And that made it such an honor for me to be associated with someone like Miles Davis, to the point where I had no problems in going to Ron Carter or any of the other people who were associated with Miles, because I knew what I was getting, which was only the best at the level in which they performed. I can't get any better than that.
Just phenomenal. Look, Bill, you've been more than generous with your time. I've got one question before you go. It's a very, very brief question. Now, I spoke to a great British drummer who's done stuff for so many people over the years, a gentleman by the name of Mark Brzezicki. And I told him I was speaking to you, and he said, I said, look, if you've got a question, I'll gladly ask it. And he straight away got onto Spectrum. He was talking about the North drums and things, but he said, I need to know what snare drum was used on Spectrum, if Bill can remember.
Salidi, 1937, a Lady Ludwig.
Wow. Okay. I wasn't expecting that.
And if you want to hear it, I don't know, he doesn't play it that much. Will Calhoun has it now.
Wow, really?
No, yeah. I mean, actually, I have it. It's Will's drum, but I have to give it to him. Yeah.
Okay, sure.
But it's in my collection, but it's earmarked for him. I have a few individuals whom I found to be very special people to me. One is Gary Hussman, who has my Gladstone, has my Black Diamond Pearl Gladstone. That he normally plays around. I don't know if he plays with it these days. He's been a bit under the weather, but
yes, he has.
He's had it since 2015, 2014. But you see, it's a kind of a. I'm just following through on what happened to me. I got a snare drum from Louis Belson. I got a snare drum from Papa Joe. That was my Black Diamond Pearl. Not my in Ludwig. What does it call it? Black Beauty.
Black Beauty, yeah.
Yeah, that was on this. That's the drum I used on the first Mahavishnu album, the snare drum, and the rest of the drum set was Ziggy Singleton's old drum set. That when he died, it was an old Radio King Slingerland 22, and then his 9x13, and I think I got and Al Duffy made he took the 14 and put tom leg mounts on it because I couldn't afford it, and for him all of the stuff for the parts, it cost me $150 to get the drum set together so I could use it on a recording session. Because I was working at PPC at the time, Professional Percussion Center. Yeah.
But how nice that people give you these things and you actually use them, and that's the way it should be.
That's important. Yeah, Louis Slingerland Copper it's a great sounding drum, and I used it with the WDR big band, and it's cut right through, no problem.
Bill, look, you have been a wonderful guest, and I can't thank you enough for giving up your time so generously. It's appreciated, and I'm sure everybody who's watching or listening, if you're on the podcast, is going to thoroughly enjoy this. There's been some absolute golden nuggets, and I really appreciate it.
Okay, beautiful. I hope to do it again. Let's see what we can do.
Honestly, I can't thank you enough. I really can't. You've been a gentleman. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure, man.
Fabulous 100th guest.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Have a good one.
Thank you, Bill. Take care. Lovely to talk to you.
Bye-bye. You too.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.